the sound of the hammer hitting the starter to get the podcast where I, your host Gary, discuss my world of G.I. Joe, whether that's what's going on in current events, things I'm getting in the mail, watching reruns on YouTube, or just experiencing G.I. Joe and pop culture. And every episode we take a look at a vehicle or playset from the vintage line. This is the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod. And this episode, it's the 29th episode, and we have another comic to look at. G.I. Joe 295 came out about a week and a half ago, and take a look at that. And then also go over some mail calls. But before we get into that, it's really what happened over this weekend. It was San Diego Comic-Con. And in G.I. Joe news, they released Sergeant Slaughter and G.I. Joe Classified. They showed off the G.I. Joe Classified HasLab Hiss. They showed off the G.I. Joe HasLab Sky Striker with characters carded with beautiful artwork. Adam Riches shared an in-depth overview of his artwork for Night Force Ripcord. He shared that on Facebook. It was really cool to see all the effort he put into that, and it really shows in the final product. Got a first look at Failsafe on the card, and some good things going there. The HasLab Sky Striker I am excited for. Can't wait to get mine in the mail. And the G.I. Joe Classified Hiss, they showed the new mold for the retro Cobra Commander with the Mickey Mouse logo. In the middle of the first day of the show, they dropped G.I. Joe Classified Sergeant Slaughter. So that came out in the middle of nowhere. I was working, so I was unable to get it on Pulse. However, I was able to pre-order it on Big Bad Toy Store. Got that coming along, and then I was able to find a way to get Dr. Mindbender. Got quantity 1 on its way to me. That was the max. The best thing was, if you listen to the previous episode of the Chaplain's Assistance Motor Pod, I talked all about Serpentor and his air chariot and how it is a must-own. And now we got the G.I. Joe Classified Serpentor coming out. And today, while perusing social media, I saw some people were like, maybe it's a little premature for Serpentor. I don't know. I think maybe you got some brand synergy coming along. We have Serpentor / Genghis Khan coming back in the comic book. More on that in a little bit. But is it the time? I think so. I think it's cruising along. I don't think they need to do every character in the line before they get to Serpentor. It's good to have variety. I think maybe they should concentrate on more characters to do rather than doing repaints of Snake Eyes and Roadblock, and maybe we don't need another Cobra Commander. But I think it's, Serpentor's a great character. I like him more and more. I'm getting more into the sci-fi aspects of the G.I. Joe mythos, and it doesn't always have to be realistic military action. It doesn't always have to be Arashikage ninja action. And of course, it also doesn't have to be sci-fi fantasy either. It's a mix of all of these things, and that's what makes G.I. Joe unique, especially to me. But the other exciting news to come out of San Diego Comic-Con is Larry Hama made it into the Eisner Hall of Fame, and he was absolutely, in his words, gobsmacked. And it's a fitting, I think, for the father of G.I. Joe in comic books. I think it is only fitting because if you think about what he did in the comic industry overall, working everybody from Wally Wood to Neil Adams to his editing and subsequent writing for Marvel Comics. His Wolverine series was excellent. He had a lengthy run on Generation X. He's done, recently he did Iron Fist, and now he did some issues of Patch, and I got to catch up reading on all those. But he brought through the toy line. He could have just phoned in the G.I. Joe comic book, but he didn't. And he produced a quality comic book for 12 years. He wrote it. And how many kids getting a comic book for a toy line, in the age before, when comic books actually were semi-ubiquitous, before the move in the 90s to mostly, off of newsstands and into specialty shops, how, to grab a kid and hook them into a comic book reading, he basically indoctrinated almost a whole generation of fans who would go on, even if they moved on from G.I. Joe, they kept reading comic books, and his contributions to that medium is huge, especially as an editor with bringing along new talent. Probably one of his best editorial challenges was bringing along a whole bunch of new creators in the Dakota North series. He shepherded the Nam. He did a lot of good work for the comic books, and he's only deserving of the Hall of Fame induction. So congratulations to Larry Hama, and I look forward to getting a sketch from him at Terrificon in less than a week as I record this. Moving on from San Diego Comic-Con, I'll jump right over into mail calls, and I've been keeping it a little bit light in the purchasing department. I just need to take a break from spending. All the pre-orders hitting out at once put a huge dent in the credit card bill. The plastic is crying for mercy. So the only thing I really did was I had gotten Overkill version 4, the mail away. It's essentially a repaint of the Supersonic Talking Commanders Overkill from 1992. And it's solid. They didn't really do anything with the back, which kind of stinks, but who cares? It's a robot. And it's nice. It's green and blue. It still has the chest gimmick. It is a wonderful repaint. And then what happened is it turned me on to the rest of the Mail Away series, which was redecos of version 2 Bats. So we got the Bat V2, and it's painted almost in a Bat V1 color scheme. It looks really attractive, has some red piping on the shoulders, and it really shows off how good that version 2 mold is, right? However, so if you got this mail away set in the early 2000s, you got Overkill version 4, you got 3 Bat V2s, they're black and yellow, and then you also got 2 Inferno Bats, which are translucent red version 2 bats, and those are cool too. It's a great set. I got Overkill first for less than $20, and then it was just like I posted it on Facebook, and Anything Joe's, said it's a great set, and then I'm like, oh yeah, let me go look up the set, and then next thing you know, I'm buying the set because it is a great set, and it's hanging out, right? It's hanging out now in my collection, and I got it displayed in my new shelving in my bedroom. I got more display space for my stuff, so that worked out good because that means I can start working on the basement again and also get moving on the I need to create room tag sale coming soon. But that really wraps up, that brings me up to current date on what's going on for me. So let's start the reviews by taking a look at G.I. Joe 295, High Stakes, Part 5. The creative team on this, again, is writer Larry Hama. Artist is S.L. Gallant with inks by Maria Keene. Jay Brown on colors. Neil Uyetake on letters. Riley Farmer, the editor. The group editor, Tom Waltz. And research specialist, Diana Davis. First off, we're going to talk about the covers real quick. There are 4 covers for this issue. Cover A by Freddie Williams II, colors by Fabrizio Kamaputra, and it's the 5th of the 5 connecting variants. You have Zema and Tomax Paoli in the background, and you have Stalker, Beachhead, Covergirl, Budo, in the foreground, and they're in the hands, and I think the hands are of Cobra Commander from issue 293. So it's a good fitting end. I've really enjoyed this connecting variant covers set. And then we have cover B by S.L. Gallant and J. Brown on colors. And I really like this one. It's Serpentor holding a Cobra Casino chip over his right eye. And if you look closely, his right eye is scarred. And why would his right eye be scarred? That is a callback to when Zartan shot an arrow and killed Serpentor by hitting him in the eye. So that is a really cool cover. I really like that one. The retailer incentive cover by John Royal is the Baroness in a snowsuit. Who doesn't love a snow bunny, right? And you have, providing her cover, you have a snow serpent, and you got a cobra wolf in the background. And it's a really good pinup cover by John Royal. You know, what a talent. And I will admit, I actually went on eBay and found this cover because it was sold out at my local comic shop, because it is a hot cover and nothing sells like the Baroness and a pinup. So I spent $45 to get it. Proud, not proud, but it's one of those things where it's a quality cover and it's getting near the end. So it's like, I might as well splurge. There's only a few more issues to go before this wraps up. And then finally, we have the online exclusive cover by Dave Johnson featuring Snake Eyes. I really only got the thumbnail for this right now. You got Roadblock and Duke behind Snake Eyes with some Sky Strikers flying in the background. It's a connecting cover variant. It's online exclusive to IDW's website. That will eventually work its way into my house. And if I was to only pick one cover for this issue, it would definitely be S.L. Gallant's. It's a solid cover, and it's foreshadowing what eventually is going to happen sometime in this series. And hopefully sometime in this series, we'll be talking more about Serpentor, because there's not too much of him. We begin the comic with Mindbender quickly summing up to Laura, Crimson Guardsman, Laura 343, bringing us up to speed as the reader, because it's only been 2 weeks since the last issue. It's doing a really good job. It's really in that vibe, and, just setting the scene and also separating Laura away from the main activity in Serpentor's chambers. And S.L. Gallant in these 2 pages does a really good job of using Serpentor in his tube. You're not supposed to be paying attention to Serpentor except in one panel, but if you follow him in each panel, you can see his movements inside the tube, keeping an eye on what's going on in the Cobra Casino in this. And I thought it was subtle, but it was done well. Then we go over to Helix, Dawn, Throwdown, and Scarlet working their way through the casino to get to Mindbender's lab. And it's just really capturing the chaos that's going on in the casino. And it's a really good setup for the rest of the book. There's some good jokes, White Snake's playing on the muzak at the casino. It's just good story beats. It goes from setup, a little break in tension, and then it moves into action with Scarlet's team fighting the casino bats, systematically moving them to Dr. Mindbender's lab. You have the action of the defense of Dr. Mindbender's lab and, the resolution of that conflict. It's really good. So it moves with beats, and it moves fast, and it's engaging, but sometimes it feels like it could have been condensed a little bit. And that's just because the storytelling seems to be, stretched out a little bit. Not to a point where I'd be complaining about it, but to the point where a couple story beats seems that it could have been compressed a little bit and we could have moved somewhere else. But I also know that there's a pacing thing that you have to do when you have, where your story needs to end in 5 more issues. So you have to make sure that the story beats follow it. So it's like noticeable, but not horrible. And it ends on a good cliffhanger because we all know from the last issue and from the first few pages that Laura 343 is supposed to capture Snake Eyes, who we know is Sean. And then here's also where they actually refer to him as Sean in front of the other Cobras. So it's like, what's going on? But maybe that's for our benefit, not for the story's benefit. But sometimes we can all use a reminder that without affecting the story or affecting headcanon. So it's solid. It's a good issue. Just a couple things that probably could have taken it up a notch, in my opinion. So looking forward to the next 5 issues, and it's still moving along, and I feel it's still a quality book. It's one of my 3 books I read every month as soon as it comes out. What can I say? G.I. Joe 295, give it a read if you like decent action comic books. Being at the Cobra Casino on Cobra Island, that reminds me of one thing, and that is swamps or marsh. Now, something that swamps and marsh remind me of are V8-powered airboats in the southeastern United States. And what vehicle powered by Cobra is an airboat, and its pilot is from the south? That is the Cobra Water Moccasin from 1984. And we're going to take a look at that right now. And to start off with, the Cobra Water Moccasin is from 1984. It did come with a driver, Copperhead. And Copperhead does have a variant, and discuss that real quick. So the variant has a different paint application on the helmet and the arms and gloves. They painted his armbands and gloves the same blue as his vest, and the helmet has no other paint apps other than being painted, again, that same blue as his vest. In subsequent releases, they added green highlights to his helmet and also changed his armbands and his gloves to that same bright green. The version without the bright green is the harder to find. I have had about a half dozen or so Copperheads in my time of collecting G.I. Joe the past 10 years or so. And I've only gotten one of the dark or the plain green variants. They're pretty cool when you can find them. And of course, they're going to bring a little more money because they're a harder to find variant. Now, the regular figure, again, we'll start with the helmet, is like a medium blue, almost like a sea blue. And it has a bright green stripe down the center of the helmet. It's textured, ribbed. And then on either side of his helmet, he has like either air vents or, we'll call them air vents for probably to allow him to hear better through the helmet. Those will also be highlighted. The grills would be highlighted in that same bright green. The helmet has a mouthpiece or mouth cover, like a motocross helmet, but not quite as pronounced as, let's say, the Lamprey from 1985. And you can see his eyes because there's either no glass in front of his eyes, or we're supposed to suspend disbelief that there would be a goggle over his mask, like the eels from 1985 as well. And his eyes are painted black with, but you don't see his eyebrows. Moving down to his chest, he has that teal or dark teal blue tank top. He has a holster over his left side for a pistol. And, he has the black leather holding it in place. And then in the dead center of his chest, he has a silver Cobra emblem. His arms are bare because he is wearing a tank top, but he does have those bright green armbands around his triceps, and also bright green, like driving gloves. And one thing to note, they are connected to his torso, and his torso is a little bit wider, like he's a strong guy. So he's built kind of big. It seems almost like his chest area seems bigger than, say, Roadblock. So he's definitely a bigger character. You move down to his waist piece. His waist is molded in that medium blue. It's not painted. And I can tell it's not painted because mine is starting to sun fade in that area rather than the paint, which paint usually isn't the fading. It's usually the molded plastic. And his belt, like leather belt or chaps, is painted black with riveting around the edges. And finally, we move to his legs. The inside interior of his legs is in that bright green and ribbed, so almost like he would be riding a motorcycle type deal to prevent, chafing. And then the outside of his legs are again in that blue, and his left thigh has a bright green highlight, and his right thigh has another pistol holster. And that band for the pistol holster goes all the way around his leg. Moving down to his feet, he's wearing some black boots with some belt buckles along the side of his shins. He's not as simple upon closer look as he is at first glance. And other than the fact that his head only turns left to right, you'd swear this was a 1985 figure. It's a solid figure. I like it. Has a lot of personality. But a guy with this much personality has to drive something, and that is the Cobra Water Moccasin. Now, the Cobra Water Moccasin is mostly molded in green with black accessories. So, start off with the hull. The hull is like a split design, like an airboat, and it's split, so it looks kind of like the Millennium Falcon in the front. And because it's a boat, the bottom is smooth. It doesn't have a keel or anything. It's a flat bottom. And what's good about that is if you're not playing with it in the water, it will be perfect on a hardwood floor or carpet. And when I was a kid, I had a blue carpet in my parents' living room. This thing would have been at home. And I didn't have one as a kid, so we'll just leave it at that. And on the bottom, it also has a remote-guided Gator surface torpedo. And it's this little ski-pedo thing. It has two skis on either side. It's clear on the top. It has a clear piece of plastic on the top. And it just plugs into the back. One thing is that plug on the back is like awkward sized. It's kind of like the dumbbell Missal plugs, but it's just different. And, I don't really find too much use for this rear-facing ski-pedo. On the rear of the hull, you have two platforms with one peg each, so you could put one figure on each side. And next to that platform are two cavities that are covered by covers. And those are removable, so you can store G.I. Joe weapons or accessories in them, or maybe something else you don't want your parents to find. That's cool too. And also, I will tell you one other thing that they do capture, and that is water. And if you float in this, we'll get to that later, but they're not watertight. Stay at the back. So the back has the rotor, which is attached to a thumb wheel. So you twist the thumb wheel, it will turn the fan blade. And behind that thumb wheel is the engine. The engine is a twin supercharged Destro V12. It makes 580 horsepower, and it has a 9,250 RPM redline. Here's an example where Destro was actually part of the G.I. Joe canon or the Cobra canon as early as 1984. So they're still fleshing out the line, and they are looking at it forward enough with adding him into the weapon supplier role. And that is actually hiding underneath another cover. So there's a lot of good detail to, have your characters work on this. Let's say, a Techno Viper or just a regular Cobra Trooper, like Copperhead can't get it started, and Copperhead's from the South, so he's probably handy. He can probably fix most stuff with a hammer, baling wire, and duct tape, and WD-40. I mean, it's pretty cool to have that much detail. And the cover has actually more detail too. So on the underside of the cover, it's textured like it's like sound deadener or matting. But then on the top, you have the grates, the grills, to highlight, that there's more going on underneath this cover. So, and when it's installed, it looks like it's part of the hull. It's great detailing. It's great model aesthetics in a toy, in a kid's toy. and they stick on securely too. The fan is black, and it is in a black shroud. And the black shroud runs across the back of the hull. When you snap the hulls together, it locks into place. But the shroud actually can be deformed if you're looking for these used. And there's a lot of these hulls or shells cheap. This was not one of your most expensive toys for 1984. It's not like you were buying the whale. But it does share that fragility of the shroud that the whale has, or at least a little bit. It's not as fragile as the whale. There are two rudders at the back of the fan that are connected with essentially a tie rod that you can steer it left and right. And that brings that huge airboat vibe. Criticism would be if it really was an airboat. If it really was an airboat, you'd be raising this fan a little higher, but we're going to forgive it because it's a toy. That's the rear of this boat. So moving forward, we have in the center, we have the turret, and the turret is for the gunner. It's called an electrically driven gunner's turret, and the gunner will fire the 20mm DES-20B twin machine guns. And there is a left-handed grip for the gunner on this machine gun with, some detailing on top. It's nice. The only thing would be better if this was being some critical look would be maybe an ammo box on the side would add a little bit to this. But other than that, that's pretty cool. The gunner, when he put him in the turret, his feet go right to the bottom of the shell. There's no floor at the gunner's seat. It's the floor is actually the bottom of the hull. There was a way for them to save a little bit on plastic for this toy. On either side of that are the main cannon autoload mechanisms. So that's left and right. And what that's doing is that's feeding into the 44mm lateral destructor cannons. And those are molded in black, and those sit right on top. Common for those things to be broken, and then they all of a sudden start moving left and right, and they're not supposed to. There's plenty of firepower in this little guy, and I like it. It's awesome. In between the 44mm destructor cannons, you have the pilot's cockpit, where Copperhead gets the job done. And it kind of has a roll bar that you have to finagle Copperhead into, or another character. I will say this, getting Copperhead in there does involve some twisting. He is a bigger figure, but you can get him in there. But I found that once I got him in there, I couldn't really move his arms to, let's say, steer the boat. So his arms, stay over his center because I have to swivel him 90 degrees on his waist to get in there. It's like one of those things where you don't want a stiff O-ring. You want kind of a flexible O-ring on the figure. But the seat is well detailed. His whole cockpit, actually, from the top down, is well detailed. His seat has some nice simulated padding. Each side of the cockpit has some nice detail. On the right, you have a fire extinguisher. And on the left, you have a dial or gauge of some kind, and also a rope to pull. Maybe it's an ejection seat for when it gets blown up. It can eject him, and he can float to safely in his parachute. Now, when I had him in there, he sits in there, right? And then you have a windscreen that you pop on over it. And the windscreen is called the anti-glare Targa roof panel. And it has a little opening on the top. And the opening's there because he doesn't sit down far enough. And the head actually sticks out above the opening. When I was taking pictures of this, when I was playing with it, I noticed I liked it more without the Targa roof attached. It looked better or less noticeable that his head was so high up or above the roll bars. And forward of that Targa top, you have the anti-glare shell-proof windshield, and you have some nice riveting or bolts, simulated bolts around the frame of that. So that really gives it an implied strength. So you understand that it's okay, he's going into battle with this, and it's not going to be inherently dangerous to this. So this is one of those vehicles where the driver's front and center, but now you're not so You're not like making fun of it. We're taking a little bit of the toyness away to give it that little more realism look at it, which is a delicate balance, but it works here. And then we finish moving forward on the top, and then you got a couple loops to put your line, tie it to the dock, and it just completes the look with some simulated like a panel and some like friction surfaces for somebody to step on. Biggest criticism about this is floating it. And obviously it is 38 years old right now. So it's 2022, made in 1984. And so I floated it out in my stream in my backyard, getting some pictures, and it takes on water, especially if you load it up with 2 characters on either side on the back, and then you have your gunner. I noticed it would be, a little rear heavy, and all it takes is a little water. And once it gets in, it goes quick. And the other thing is, I remember those pockets I told you about on either side, those get water in it, and it just keeps weighing it down. If I was to improve this, I would find some way to either seal this or stuff the hull with styrofoam just to give it a little more buoyancy. I'm looking forward to testing out a shark because the shark does have the foam in it. I would like to see what this thing would do with foam in it to keep it afloat throughout, if I ever decide to do another photo shoot with it. Now the crew for the Water Moccasin. Well, the Water Moccasin is like a swamp vehicle or shore vehicle. So you're not going to be going out into deep sea in it. Although, it's G.I. Joe, why not? But because of Copperhead's personality and its use in the Sunbow series, I really think of this as, like I guess said, a swamp fighter. So obviously Copperhead is a natural fit. Zartan, because of his introduction being in a swamp, he fits. Those are the 2 biggest characters Cobra characters that I think of for this era being swamp related. But another character that goes with it is Crocmaster. I can see Crocmaster, being ferried on this, and then he gets dropped off on this. So it definitely fits that theme, and then so you'd have those 3 guys, you could complement it with any number of other Cobra characters. Maybe not a Crimson Guardsman, but, Cobra Trooper, a Viper. It fits a lot of eras. And if it had like a neon, if it was repainted in neon, I think the design is almost timeless enough that it could weather that as well, or it could serve later characters. And like a scenario like that would be putting Battlecore Bazooka and Leatherneck against this, or Muskrat from 1990. So there's a lot of versatility in this, even beyond 1984. So it's a solid vehicle, and to rate this 0 to 5. With quarter scales being optional, and we'll just call it swamps. Out of 0 to 5 swamps, this is a total 5 swamp vehicle. This is a must-have. If you're a G.I. Joe fan, I think you're going to have a Water Moccasin in your collection. It's an affordable vehicle, complete. It's not super expensive, and it just fits. It fits almost in every collection. It's an absolute must-own. I keep 2 for myself, and God only knows how many broken shells I have laying around. And before I close out the episode, I want to say thank you to all those who played the hashtag G.I. Joe prisoner transfer game. What these gentlemen did was they hashtagged G.I. Joe prisoner transfer on my posts on social media, and at Matt Kind on Twitter took home the prize, which was G.I. Joe Classified number 7 Gung Ho. So congratulations to him. I hope he enjoys the figure, and thank you for listening and playing. And with that concludes the 29th Missal for the Masses, the Chaplin's Resistance Motor Pod. I have been your host, Gary. If you would like to follow me on social media, That is at Chaplain Joe Pod on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And the Chaplain Sisters Motor Pod is a member of The Pint, a pop culture podcast family. We may be strange, but we're not estranged, and you can find them wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And while you're listening to this podcast, if you rate or review or like, subscribe, that means a whole lot. It only helps this podcast grow and get better. And before I go, one more final missile for the masses. Be decent to each other. See ya.